We are going deep into this research article from 1986 by Jürgen Frembgen. He's like a historical detective piecing together, all these oral traditions and clan histories, even royal genealogies.
Oh, it's really fascinating how he blends those sources to kind of get a sense of Nager's past, right? It's like solving a puzzle. Each piece kind of reveals, a bit more about people, their origins, how they interacted with their surroundings.
Exactly. So we're going to tackle some big questions like, who were the first people to settle in Nager? How did Islam become, woven into their culture? What about these legendary figures like Moghlot and Kamal Khan? What were their stories?
And we can't forget those fortified villages, those Khan. Those are central, I think, to understanding the history of Nager and the power dynamics.
For sure. Okay, before we get too deep, let's set the stage. Where exactly is Nager?
So Nager is in present-day North Pakistan, high up in the Karakoram range. It's, this beautiful and rugged landscape. The people who live there, the Nagarkuts, they've adapted to this environment over centuries. Primarily, they're farmers and herders. And, what's interesting is they actually speak two languages.
Two languages? What are they?
Yeah, they speak Burushaski, which is a language isolate, meaning it has no known relation to any other language family. It's quite unique. But they also speak Shina, which is an Indo-Aryan language. So this kind of linguistic blend speaks to the history of the region, the mixture of different cultures over time.
This isn't like your average history lesson, is it? Nager has this rich, cultural tapestry. I want to know more about these clans.
Yeah.
They seem so central, right, to understanding Nager's social structure.
Absolutely. So the Nagarkuts, they're organized into these clans. They're called Rum in Burushaski.
Yeah.
And these clans are based on shared ancestry. And, they play a role in so many aspects of life there, like from social interactions to land ownership and political alliances. It's a system that's been in place for centuries. And, it still shapes Nager's identity today.
So it's more than just a family tree. It's like the backbone of their society.
Exactly. And to make things even more interesting, there's been a lot of migration into Nager, especially from regions like Baltistan and Gore. This has brought, a mix of customs and traditions.
Wow. Mountains, clans, two languages, migration. We're dealing with a real melting pot. Let's go back to the very beginning. What about the very first people to call Nager home?
So the earliest history of Nager, well, it's a little bit mysterious, as is often the case with regions where, oral traditions are how they've preserved knowledge. There are clues, though. Researcher K. Jetmar, he proposed a theory that suggests that the Burusho people, the Nagarkuts are part of this group, may have originated in the areas of Gore and Chiles, which are southwest of Nager.
So a possible migration from those areas to Nager.
Exactly. But like with any theory based on oral history and limited archaeological evidence, there's room for, more research.
Sure, but I bet those oral traditions have some cool stories.
Oh, absolutely. So, for example, there's this legend about, an ancient population in Hopar, which is a village in Nager. And the story goes that a huge natural disaster, maybe a landslide or a glacial advance, wiped out almost everyone in the village.
Oh, wow. Were there any survivors?
So the legend says that only an old woman and her granddaughter survived. And they later married into the Burushaski clan, which is one of the main clans in Nager. So their lineage continued. It's a story about the power of nature and, resilience of people.
It's amazing how those stories pass down. They give us glimpses into the past, even if the details have changed over time.
They do. They really remind us that history is more than just facts and dates. It's about those stories that shape our identity. Speaking of stories, let's move on to a, more specific time in Nager's history, and that is the arrival of a really important person, Moghlot.
Moghlot, the founder of Nager's ruling dynasty.
That's right. He arrived in Nager with the Musharkut clan, another important group, and his arrival signals the beginning of a dynasty.
Right, so Moghlot arrives, establishes a dynasty. What happens next?
Well, his sons, Shah and Nico, they were key players in expanding their father's legacy. They each built these impressive fortified villages, the Khan. Shah built Shah Khan, and Nico built Nico Khan.
Wait, hold on. What exactly is a Khan? What does that look like?
Imagine, these huge structures strategically located on hilltops or other places that gave them a good view. Essentially, these Khan were fortified villages built for defense. And, they were also symbols of power. They housed not only the ruling families, but their followers, craftspeople, soldiers, all sorts of people.
So like a castle, a fortress, and a village all in one. That's a statement. Did everyone live in these Khan, or was it just certain people?
Not at first, but things change when a new ruler, Kamal Khan, comes in. He's super important in Nager's history, not just for his, military strength, but also for his promotion of Islam.
This is where religion starts to play a bigger role.
Yeah, it's an interesting chapter. So Kamal Khan, he ruled from around 1660 to 1720. And during his rule, the first mosque was built in Nagar Khan. That's a huge moment in Nagar's cultural history.
It's like a monument to this growing influence of Islam. But was there more to it?
Yeah. So Kamal Khan, he wasn't just focused on spiritual matters. He was also very aware of security. It seems like he was concerned about threats, probably from Hunza, their neighbor. And because of this, he issued an order that really changed the way people lived in Nager.
Okay, I'm hooked. What did he do?
He ordered all the clans to leave their settlements and move into Nager Khan. So think about that. Entire clans, uprooted from their lands for safety.
Wow, so everyone was living under the ruler, inside the Khan. Kamal Khan knew how to bring his people together physically and spiritually for their survival.
Yeah, and that decision to move everybody into Nager Khan, it had big consequences. For one thing, it led to the older settlements in Nager being abandoned.
It sounds like Kamal Khan really understood strategy. What happens after that? Did everyone stay in Nager Khan?
Well, that's a story for the next part of our deep dive. We'll look at more fascinating rulers and see how Nager kept changing in the centuries that followed.
I can't wait. Power struggles, cultural changes, and amazing characters. Nager's history is a wild ride. We'll be back after a short break to continue exploring this place.
Welcome back. So Kamal Khan made that huge decision, to move everyone into Nager Khan for safety. What happened after that? Did they just stay there?
Well, not quite. You see, Kamal Khan passed away around 1720, and his son, Rahim Shah, he took over as ruler. And this is a time when, Nager continued to grow and change, but it also brought new challenges.
A new ruler, new challenges. I guess that makes sense. Did things change much under Rahim Shah?
It's hard to say, to be honest, because, historical records from this time, they're a little thin.
Yeah.
But we do know that a bunch of rulers followed Rahim Shah, like Azir Khan first, then Alif Khan, then Zafar Khan, and then Sikandar Khan. Each one left their own mark.
So lots of rulers, lots of changes. Who were some of the big names? What did they do?
Well, take Alif Khan, for example. During his rule, they built this incredible canal, the Istok Canal. It was a huge irrigation project, and it really helped Nager grow. A canal. That sounds ambitious, especially in a mountainous place like Nager.
It was a game changer, really. It made it possible to grow crops in areas where it was really difficult before. It's like a symbol of, how innovative they were.
And I think that canal also led to the founding of a new village, right? Askirdas.
That's right. The Istok Canal made Askirdas possible. So you have this whole new community springing up because they could use this water to, make the land fertile.
Wow. That's incredible. They literally changed the landscape. Okay, so Alif Khan, the canal builder. What about some of those other rulers?
Well, under Azir Khan I, there was a burst of new settlements. In Nager, you have villages like Fol and Manal Gutstas popping up. And then over in Sumair, you have fortified villages like Jaitur Khan, Rashfari, and Dolto.
That sounds like Nager was booming.
It was. And it's not just about the numbers, right? You have these new clans coming in, each with their own traditions and stories. It was a real mix of cultures, languages, you name it.
All these new people coming in must have really changed things. How did everyone adapt?
I mean, it wasn't always smooth sailing. New clans meant, figuring out who got what land and how to get along. But it also brought new skills, fresh ideas. It shows how resilient and adaptable the Nagar Cuts were to, keep things together despite all that change.
Right. It's not just about rulers and dynasties, right?
Yeah.
It's about how regular people live their lives, the challenges they faced.
Exactly. And that resilience, it was really tested, Zafar Khan, for example, he ruled for 40 years. That's a long time to be in charge.
Wow, 40 years. He must have seen a lot of changes during his time. What were some of the big things that happened?
Well, one thing is that people started moving down from the higher settlements to the lower villages. They were probably looking for better land to farm and maybe more opportunities.
So a shift in the population. But was that just people making their own choices? Or did the rulers have something to do with it?
Well, the rulers definitely had some power. Like Zafar Khan's son, Azur Khan II, he allowed some members of the Burushaski clan to be kicked out of Hopar. They were resettled in Upper-Nager and Chulp.
So even the big clans, they weren't, completely free from the ruler's influence.
That's right. It makes you think about why those decisions were made. Was it politics, economics, or maybe even personal rivalries? Power was a huge factor in how Nager developed.
And all of this happening, during a time of huge changes all over the world, right? The 19th century was a crazy time.
Absolutely. And that brings us to Sikandar Khan, the last ruler we'll talk about. He came to power after a period of, some trouble within the ruling family, and he had to guide Nagar through some big transitions.
Okay, so Sikandar Khan comes in when things are a little messy. What was he like as a ruler?
He was smart, and he knew how to adapt. He understood that the world was changing, and Nagar couldn't just ignore that. One of the biggest events during his rule was the British coming into Nagar.
Ah, right. The British Empire was expanding everywhere in the 19th century. How did that affect Nagar?
It changed things completely. The British basically put an end to the threat from Hunza, so that was a big relief for the Nagar Cuts. It brought a new kind of peace and stability.
It's a huge deal, not having to live in fear of being attacked all the time.
Absolutely. And once that threat was gone, Sikandar Khan made a decision that was really symbolic. He lifted Kamal Khan's old order, the one that forced everyone to live inside Nagar Khan.
So people could finally leave the Khan and go back to their old lands.
Yeah, but it wasn't just that. Nagar Khan was actually becoming dangerous because of landslides. It was literally falling apart, so people were starting to feel unsafe.
So it was freedom and danger, both pushing people to leave Nagar Khan.
Yeah. It's interesting, right, how the environment itself can influence how people live.
For sure. So where did people go once they left Nagar Khan? Did they go back to their old villages?
Some did, but there were also lots of new settlements popping up. Like you have Shaman and Pailo Kushal near Uyumnagar, and farmsteads in places like Askurdas and Shayar. And then there's Hakuchar, a completely new village between Shayar and Fukar.
So a mix of old and new. Nagar was growing in all kinds of ways.
It was, but one village was different, Sumayar.
What was special about Sumayar?
Well, most of Nagar, it was all about, mixing different clans and cultures. But Sumayar, they were pretty closed off. The people there, mostly descendants of Balti immigrants, they were very careful about who they let live in their village.
They wanted to keep things separate. Why do you think that was?
Hard to say for sure, but it probably has to do with, their own history, their traditions, and maybe they just wanted to keep their identity strong. They did let in a few small groups, like the Saitoding, the Kanjakuts, and the Baricho, but for the most part, they kept to themselves.
It's crazy how different places can be even within a small region like Nagar.
It is. We've seen how Nagar has been shaped by so many things, migration, power struggles, religion, even the landscape itself. It's a story of resilience and adaptation.
It's been a really amazing journey so far. But what does it all mean for us today? Why should we care about, this place so far away?
Well, one thing is it shows that history isn't just about big events and famous people. It's about how regular people lived and the choices they made.
And Nagar's story is all about resilience. It's about cultural exchange and how people adapt.
It also, I think, helps us see the world differently. By learning about places like Nagar, we get a better understanding of, how diverse the world is and how connected we all are.
We've covered a lot, but I feel like there's still so many questions.
That's the thing about history. It's a journey that never ends. But I want to leave you with a thought. We've talked about how the threat from Hunza really pushed Nagar to develop in certain ways. But what if that threat had never existed?
That's interesting. A what-if scenario.
Exactly. Would Nagar be different today? Would it be more open, more integrated from the beginning? Or would there have been other conflicts that changed things? It's something to think about.
Yeah, history could have gone in so many different directions.
So to our listeners, keep exploring Nagar's history. There are so many stories out there waiting to be discovered.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Nagar. It's been a pleasure to explore this amazing place with you. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep learning. Okay.